The baby was standing in the room no one was allowed to enter. His hand was wrapped around the old man's shaking finger. Elena froze in the doorway, a bucket still in her arms. That job paid the rent, the food, her son's shoes. Children were not permitted past the front gate. It was written into her contract. The cloth slipped from her fingers and landed without a sound. She did not breathe. Inside, the old man had been shaking for an hour. He did not know the room. He did not know the year. Leo pushed a half-chewed stuffed rabbit into his lap. "Here," the boy said. Elena's mouth opened. No sound came out. She was already counting how long the last money would last. Then the old man's hand closed around the small fingers. Nobody moved. He looked down, and something in his face came apart. The man who had not finished a sentence in 11 months spoke one word: "Stay." What neither of them understood was that this would open a heart sealed for 40 years, drag a secret out of a drawer 2 floors below, and permanently change the lives of 9 people already signing their names to his fortune. Welcome to Luxevru Stories TV. If stories like this one matter to you, subscribing helps this small channel keep telling them. Tap like if you're staying, and tell us in the comments, which city, which country are you watching from tonight? Now back to that doorway. The house had 41 rooms and no sound in any of them. Arthur Vance had built it in the year he turned 40, on a hill where 3 counties met, because he wanted to stand at a window and see land he owned in every direction. Now the curtains stayed drawn. The thermostat sat at 62 degrees, because the estate accountant had written a memorandum about heating costs in an occupied property, and nobody had argued with him. The chandeliers in the long hall had not been switched on in 9 months. Dust sheets covered the furniture in the east wing like snow that never melted. Arthur sat in a wheelchair beside a cold fireplace, wearing a cardigan a stranger had buttoned for him. He did not know what day it was. He had stopped asking, because asking produced answers that slid off him like water off glass. The nurse who came at 7 each morning wrote the date on a whiteboard by the door in green marker. He had looked at it for 11 months, and it had never once meant anything. What he knew was the cold. He knew the smell of the room, lemon polish and old paper, and something underneath it that reminded him of a hospital. He knew that when the wind came up the hill, the window nearest his bed made a sound like a man breathing through his teeth. He was afraid almost all of the time. That was the part nobody wrote on the whiteboard. At 10:30, a woman in blue scrubs came in with a tray. She set it on the table beside him and said good morning, in the loud, slow voice people used with him now, and told him it was Tuesday, and that his tea had 2 sugars in it the way he liked. He did not like 2 sugars. He had never liked 2 sugars. He could not find the words for that, and the not finding made his chest tighten. She reached for his arm to help him sit forward. "Don't," he said. She stepped back. Her face did a small, careful thing, and then went smooth again. She said she was only trying to help him drink. He gripped the arms of the chair with both hands. His knuckles went white and stayed white. He said he could do it himself, and the words came out crooked and too loud, and a shine of tea went over the rim of the cup onto the saucer. She waited. Then she wrote something on a chart and left the tray where it was and went out. And the door clicked, and he sat there with his hands shaking and the cup untouched in front of him. He drank nothing for 2 hours. That was the whole argument, and he had won it. And it had cost him the only warm thing in the room. He was 78 years old. He had signed contracts that moved 11,000 people out of their homes. He had once made a man cry in a boardroom and then finished his sentence. He could not now lift a cup without permission, and he could not say the word please without something in him going up in flames. The agency that supplied his staff had a note in his file. Difficult, high turnover, recommend rotation. That was the word they used for it, rotation. 19 different people had cleaned that house in the last year. He could not have named one of them. 2 floors below, at the long table in the dining room, his son Richard sat with a fountain pen and a stack of documents in a leather folder. Richard Vance was 49, and he had his father's jaw and none of his father's stillness. His wife Victoria sat across from him with her coat still on, because she never took her coat off in that house. On the table between them were papers from 3 separate law firms, tabbed in yellow at every place a signature belonged. Richard had not gone upstairs. He had been in the house 40 minutes. He turned a page and said the trust needed 9 signatures before anything could move, and that they had 7, and that the remaining 2 were the problem. He said the word problem the way other people said the weather. Victoria asked whether the old man could still hold a pen. Richard said that was not the issue. He said the issue was whether a physician would put his name to a capacity assessment, because without one, every page in the folder was decoration. Then he said the thing he had been circling for an hour. "I'm not going to apologize for wanting what he was always going to leave anyway," he said. "I gave that man 30 years and a grandchild he never asked to meet. He owes me the house. He owes me all of it." Victoria said nothing. She looked at the ceiling, in the direction of the room above them, and then looked away. Down the corridor from the dining room, behind a door that had stayed shut all year, was Arthur's study. A desk of black walnut, a drawer on the lower left that had been locked since before Richard finished school. Neither of them glanced at it. It was simply a piece of furniture in a room they walked past on the way to the car. That drawer would eventually explain everything about the man upstairs, and not one person in the building knew it was there. Richard capped the pen. He told Victoria the doctor was booked for Thursday and that a nurse had already been briefed to describe the worst of the episodes. Then he gathered the folder and put on his gloves. At the front door he stopped and told the day nurse that they should only call him if something changed. He said it kindly. He said the word changed and did not say any other word, and both of them understood him perfectly. He did not go upstairs. The car went down the drive between the bare limes and out through the gate, and the gate closed itself behind it, and the house went back to being 41 rooms with no sound in any of them. Upstairs, Arthur heard the engine. It reached him faintly through the breathing window, and something in him lifted before he could stop it. A car. Someone was coming. He turned his head toward the door and he waited, and he kept waiting, and his hands started to move on the blanket over his knees, smoothing it, the way a man tidies a room for a visitor. Nobody came up the stairs. After a long while, he stopped smoothing the blanket. He looked at the door and could not have said any more what he had been listening for, only that it had gone. The tea on the tray had gone cold and gray with a skin across the top. That evening, he had what the charts called an episode. He woke in the dark and did not know the room. The shapes of his own furniture stood over him like people. He shouted for someone whose name he could not reach, and the sound came out as a noise rather than a word, and a night nurse came in and turned on a lamp and said his name twice, firmly, the way you would to a dog that had got into the road. He clutched the front of his cardigan with both hands and could not get his breath. She stood at the foot of the bed with her arms folded and waited for it to pass, because that was what the protocol said to do, and after 11 minutes it passed. Then she turned off the lamp and went back to her chair in the hall, and Arthur Vance lay in the dark in a house worth $90 million, alone, with the taste of fear in his mouth and no memory left of who he had been calling for. On Friday, the housekeeping agency lost another cleaner. She left at noon without collecting her wages, and the supervisor made a note and moved a name up the list. The name belonged to a woman who had answered the advertisement 8 days earlier and had not yet worked a single shift in the house, because there had been no shift to give her. She was 26. She had been widowed at 24. Her rent was $410 behind, and her sitter charged $9 an hour, which was more than she could carry. On Monday morning, in rain that had not stopped since Saturday, she came up the drive on foot from the bus stop with her hair flattened to her forehead and a cheap black coat buttoned to the throat. The housekeeper let her in and told her the rules. No radios, no phones, no visitors, ever. Elena nodded at every one of them and signed her name where she was told to sign it, and nobody in that hall thought to look at the small dried print of a child's hand on the sleeve of her coat. She worked her first 6 days in that house without once seeing Arthur Vance's face. The housekeeper sent her to the east wing where the dust sheets were and told her to work quietly and take her lunch in the laundry. Elena polished banisters nobody touched. She washed windows in rooms with no chairs. On the second day, she found a grand piano under a sheet with the lid closed and a wine glass sitting on the closed lid, and the ring the glass had left had gone into the varnish so deep it had become part of the wood. She lifted the glass and cleaned under it anyway. On the seventh day, the night cleaner did not turn up, and Elena was sent upstairs. The corridor to the master bedroom was carpeted in a green so dark it looked black in the low light. There was a whiteboard by the door with a date on it in green marker, and the date was wrong by 2 days, and nobody had corrected it. She knocked. Nothing. She went in with her bucket. The room smelled of lemon polish and old paper. A man sat in a wheelchair by a fireplace with no fire in it, in a cardigan buttoned to the top, with a blanket over his knees, and a pair of reading glasses hanging from a thin steel chain around his neck. He looked at her the way a man looks at a stranger who has walked into his hotel room. "Who let you in?" he said. She said her name and said she was there to clean and that she would be 20 minutes. He asked her again who had let her in, and she told him again, and he asked a third time, and she answered the third time in exactly the same voice she had used for the first, without impatience, without raising it. Something in the third answer landed differently. He stopped asking. He watched her cross the room instead. She did not fluff his pillow. She did not touch his blanket. She did not do the loud, slow voice. She wiped the windowsill, emptied the bin, took the cold tea away, and when she set the fresh cup down, she put it exactly where his right hand already was, so that reaching for it would not be a defeat. He did not thank her. He drank it after she had gone. That evening, the day nurse wrote in the file that the patient had been settled. She did not write why, because she did not know, and Elena did not tell anyone, because it had not occurred to her that anything had happened. On Thursday morning, a car came up the drive, and this time somebody did climb the stairs. The doctor was a thin man with a soft leather case and a habit of saying, "we." Richard Vance came in behind him and stood by the window with his coat still on. The nurse came in third and stood by the door with a folder against her chest. Elena was on her knees in the corridor with a cloth and a bottle of oil, working the skirting board. Nobody asked her to leave, because nobody saw her at all. She heard all of it. The doctor asked Arthur what year it was. There was a long pause. Then Arthur said a year, and it was the wrong year by a long way, and the nurse made a small sound in her throat. The doctor asked him to name the man standing by the window. The pause went on so long that Elena's hand stopped moving on the skirting board. "My son," Arthur said finally. He said it carefully, like a man carrying something full to the brim across a room. Then he said, "Richard." Elena heard the tremor go out of his voice on that one word. He had got it. Whatever else had gone, that had come back. And the nurse said quietly to the doctor that the patient had been coached that morning and often repeated names he had heard in the last hour. Nobody in the room contradicted her. Elena knelt in the corridor with oil on her fingers and understood, without being told a single fact, exactly what was being done to the old man in that chair. The doctor wrote for 4 minutes. Richard did not go near the wheelchair. When they came out, the doctor was saying that he could not in good conscience certify capacity, and Richard said that was all he needed to hear, and neither of them looked down at the woman on the floor. Arthur was still holding the arms of his chair when Elena went back in. His knuckles were white. He was looking at the door his son had gone out of. She asked if he wanted the curtains open. He said nothing. She opened them anyway, and the gray light came in over him, and he shut his eyes against it and did not ask her to close them again. That was the last week before the rain. Her sitter canceled at 1:20 on a Monday afternoon, by text, with an apology and a family emergency, and no offer of another day. Elena read it, standing at the bus stop with Leo on her hip and the rain coming sideways off the hill. She had $410 of back rent behind her and $11 in her purse. She had signed a paper with the words, "No visitors" on it. She had been in the job 19 days. She could go home and lose the shift, and lose the week, and lose the job. Or she could not. She carried him up the drive under her coat. The side lounge on the ground floor had not been used in a year. Sheeted furniture, a cold radiator, a door that closed properly. She sat him on the sofa with the sheet folded back, put the half-eaten stuffed rabbit in his hands, gave him a beaker of water and a bag of crackers, and told him the rules the way you tell a 2-year-old anything. which is to say 3 times and slowly. "You stay here," she said. "Mama comes back. You stay." He nodded. He was 2. Nodding meant nothing at all, and she knew it, and she went anyway, because the alternative was a bus home and no job at the end of it. She was gone 11 minutes. She was in the kitchen, filling a bucket, waiting for the hot tap to run warm, and the pipes in that house took a long time. Everything that came after, every signature and every reversal, and every life bent onto a different road, began in those 11 minutes at a slow tap. Leo pushed the door with both hands, the way he pushed all doors, and it swung, and he went out into the hall. He went where the light was. Up the wide stairs on his hands and knees, one at a time, breathing hard through his mouth, the rabbit trailing from his fist. Along a corridor carpeted in green, so dark it looked black, past a whiteboard with the wrong date on it. He pushed the mahogany door because it was there. What happened in that room, you already know. What Elena did afterwards is the part nobody has told you. She did not run in. She could not. She stood in the doorway with the bucket in her arms and her heart going like something trapped, and she watched the old man's hand close around her son's fingers, and she heard him say the word, and she waited for the shouting. There was no shouting. Arthur Vance was crying, not neatly. His whole face had gone, and the sound coming out of him was not a sound a man of 78 makes in front of anyone. And the child stood there with his hand caught in that grip and looked up at him with the plain, unbothered patience of somebody who has not yet learned that crying is shameful. Leo patted the old man's wrist twice, the way his mother patted his back. Elena put the bucket down. She crossed the room and knelt by the wheelchair, and she said, very quietly, that she was sorry, and that she would take the boy and go, and that she would not ask for the week's pay. Arthur's hand tightened on Leo's fingers. "No," he said. "She said she would be gone in 5 minutes." "No," he said. The word came out of the middle of his chest, and it filled the room, and it was the voice of the man who had once emptied a boardroom without standing up. And for a second, Elena saw the whole of who he had been. Then it collapsed. He looked at her, and his eyes were wet and frightened, and he could not find the next thing, and his mouth worked and produced nothing. He wanted to ask her to stay. He had not asked anyone for anything in 40 years, and the machinery for it had rusted solid. So he did what he had always done instead. He gave an order. "You'll come tomorrow," he said. Both. Elena stood up slowly. She had her son's coat over her arm, and rain still in her hair. She said that she could not bring a child to work, and that the rule was in her contract, and that she would lose the job. Arthur said something about whose house it was, and Elena said, gently, "Then say it properly, sir." Nobody had spoken to him like that in 11 months. Nobody had spoken to him like a man in 11 months. He stared at her. His hands were shaking again. He opened his mouth and shut it, and the fog came in over him the way it always did when he was distressed, and he turned his head away and told her to get out. She took Leo's hand and got out. She cried on the bus, once, for about 90 seconds, with her face turned to the black window and Leo asleep against her ribs. Then she stopped, because there was food to buy with $11 and no room in the evening for anything else. She did not go back the next day. She sent a message to the agency saying she was unwell. On the second day, the housekeeper called and said that the client had asked for her by name. Not by description, by name. The staff had been trying for 11 months to get Arthur Vance to remember any of them, and he had come out of that room and given the housekeeper 2 words she did not expect, and one of them was Elena. She went back on the Thursday. He was in the chair by the cold fireplace. The whiteboard by the door had been rubbed clean, and the date on it was right, and it was not in the nurse's handwriting. He looked at her for a long time. Then Arthur Vance, who had moved 11,000 people out of their homes with a fountain pen, put his hands flat on the blanket over his knees, and said, "Please." Elena stood very still. "Please bring him," he said. "I'm asking." That was the beginning of the 8 best weeks of the old man's life, and none of them were quiet. Leo came 3 days a week, in a rucksack of crackers and cars, and the side lounge got a rug and a lamp and a radiator that worked, and the door between the lounge and the hall stayed open. The housekeeper looked at the arrangement, and looked at the man who paid her wages, and wrote nothing in any file. Arthur was not cured. Nobody is cured of what he had. There were mornings he did not know Elena's face, and afternoons he called her by a name that belonged to a woman dead for 20 years. There was a night he woke shouting, and a nurse had to stand at the foot of the bed for 11 minutes again. But the fog came in less often, and it left faster, and everybody in that house noticed it. And the reason was not medical. The reason was that a 2-year-old walked into his room every Tuesday, Thursday, and Friday, and treated him as furniture rather than tragedy. Leo climbed the wheelchair like it was playground equipment. Leo put crackers in his cardigan pocket and forgot them there. Leo brought him the rabbit every single time, with the same ceremony, and every single time Arthur took it as though it were being offered for the first time, because for him, it often was. He learned to ask. It took weeks, and it cost him things. He asked Elena to help him with the buttons on his left cuff, which he had been unable to manage for a year, and had been hiding by keeping the sleeve rolled. He asked the night nurse to leave the hall lamp on. He asked, once, in a very small voice, whether anyone had telephoned. Nobody had. He said that was fine, and turned the chair to face the window. And Elena went out and shut the door and stood in the dark corridor with her hand over her mouth for a moment, before she went back to work. On a Friday in the 6th week, he asked her to open a door on the ground floor that had been shut all year. The study smelled of cold ash and old leather. There was a black walnut desk with a green blotter, a chair with an indent still in the seat, and a drawer on the lower left with a keyhole the size of a fingernail. He wanted the desk cleared and the window opened. That was all he said he wanted. He sat in the middle of the room in his chair while she worked, holding the reading glasses that hung on the thin steel chain around his neck, turning them over and over in his fingers. Leo was on the rug with 2 toy cars, driving them into the desk leg. And it was Leo who noticed, because 2-year-olds notice small shining things, that on the same steel chain as the glasses there was a small brass key, and he stood up and grabbed at it. Arthur caught his fist. He looked down at what the boy was holding. He looked at it for a long, long time. And Elena, watching from the bookshelf with a cloth in her hand, saw a man trying to reach across 11 years of fog to something on the other side. "Not yet," he said. That was all. He put the glasses inside his cardigan and asked to go back upstairs, and Elena wheeled him out, and the study window stayed open all night, and the room aired for the first time since before his wife died. Richard came back in the 8th week. He came because a doctor in a different practice had refused to sign a second assessment, and because the family lawyer, a woman named Marguerite Hale, who had known Arthur since 1979, had put in writing that she would not add her name to the 9th line until she had spoken to him herself. 7 signatures, 2 missing, and an old woman in a black coat who would not be hurried. Richard came up the stairs at 4 in the afternoon with Victoria behind him, and he opened the bedroom door without knocking and stopped. His father was sitting up in the chair by a lit fire. There was a lamp on. The curtains were open. There was a 2-year-old asleep across his lap with a filthy stuffed rabbit under his chin, and Arthur's hand was resting on the child's back, moving very slightly, the way you do when you are keeping something asleep. He was completely calm. "Hello, Richard," he said. Richard's face did something that Elena, standing by the wardrobe, would remember for the rest of her life. It was not anger. It came before the anger. It was the look of a man who has arrived at a funeral and found the party going. "Who is that?" he said. Arthur said the boy's name. Victoria said something about hygiene and staff and liability. Richard said nothing at all for a moment. Then he crossed the room and looked down at the child on his father's knees. "You never held me," he said. The fire moved. Nobody spoke. 30 years, Richard said. "I sat outside your office on a Saturday until the cleaners came, and you walked past me to the car. I got the 6th birthday you missed, and the 9th and the 12th, and you're sitting here holding the cleaner's kid." "Yes," Arthur said. "Do you even know his name tomorrow?" "No," Arthur said. "I'll know his hand." Richard turned to Elena and told her she was finished, that the agency would be notified in the morning, that she was not to come back through the gate. And Arthur said, in the flat voice of a man reading from a document, that the agency did not employ her anymore, that he did, that the paperwork had been filed 6 days ago by Marguerite Hale, and that Richard was welcome to telephone her about it. Richard went very still. Then he said the thing he would not be able to take back. "You're not competent to hire a taxi," he said. Sign the papers." Leo woke up. He did not cry. He sat up on the old man's lap and looked at the shouting man, and then he turned around and put both arms around Arthur's neck and held on. A child had made a choice about who was safe in that room, in front of 3 adults, without knowing what a will was. Richard left. The car went down the drive between the bare limes and the gate closed itself behind it. Arthur sat with the boy's arms around his neck and his eyes shut, and he said, so quietly that only Elena heard it, that his son had been right about the Saturdays. Marguerite Hale came on the Monday, alone, in a black coat, and sat with Arthur for 2 hours with the door closed. When she came out, her eyes were red, and her voice was not. She told Elena to bring a witness who was not related to anybody, and to keep the boy out of the room, and to be available on Thursday. On the Wednesday night, Arthur asked Elena to take him down to the study on his own. She wheeled him in and turned on the lamp. He took the glasses out of his cardigan and unclipped the small brass key from the chain and asked her to leave him. She said she would be in the hall. He said, "Thank you." Then he shut the door. What was in the drawer was not money. There were no bonds in it and no deeds and no second will. There was a shoebox with the corners gone soft. Inside it were 41 drawings on paper thin as skin, done in wax crayon by a boy of 5 and 6 and 7, of a tall man in a suit, always in a suit, always standing next to a house. On the back of every one, in a woman's handwriting, a date. Arthur's wife had kept them. When she died, he had put the box in the drawer and locked it, and stopped opening that room. Underneath the drawings was one envelope, sealed, with 2 words on the front in his own hand from 11 years ago, to Richard. He had written it the week the first diagnosis came in, and he had never had the courage to post it. And underneath the envelope, at the very bottom, was a photograph taken in 1952 of a boy of 2 standing in a doorway holding a cloth rabbit, and behind him, in a bed, a very thin old man nobody had visited in 4 months. Arthur's own father. Arthur's own hand on the door. He had been that child once, and everything he had built afterwards had been a wall against ever being in that room again. And the wall had worked perfectly, and it had cost him every single person he had. The nurse found him at 2 in the morning, asleep in the chair with the drawings on his knees and the lamp still on, and she left him where he was because he was smiling. He signed on the Thursday, in the study, with the window open and the box on the desk. He signed with Marguerite Hale on one side of him and a witness from the village on the other, and Elena was not in the room, because he had asked her not to be, and she stood in the hall with Leo on her hip and did not know a single line of what was being written. Afterwards, Marguerite came out and said that Mr. Vance would like to see her. Elena went in with her heart going. Arthur had the envelope in his hands, the one with 2 words on it. He gave it to her and asked her to put it in the post herself, and to use a stamp and not a courier, because a courier was a thing you sent to an employee. Then he said he had something to ask her, and that she was allowed to say no. He asked whether she would let him pay for the boy's schooling. Not now, later. All of it, to the end, held by Marguerite where nobody could touch it. Elena said nothing for a moment. Then she asked him why. And Arthur Vance, who had never in his life explained himself to anybody, said that a stranger's child had walked into his room on the worst afternoon of his life and had held his hand, and that no amount of money had ever bought him that, and that he was not trying to buy it now. "You'll take a wage for the work," he said. "That's separate. That's owed. The other thing is a request. I'm asking." She said yes. The house did not turn into a fairy tale. Nothing does. He went downhill through the winter. There were weeks he did not know her, and 1 week he did not speak at all. The chair got a higher back and then a headrest. The night nurse came twice a night instead of once. But the curtains stayed open, and the whiteboard by the door stayed right, and the side lounge downstairs kept its rug and its lamp. And 3 days a week, a 2-year-old came up those stairs on his hands and knees, one at a time, breathing through his mouth, with a rabbit trailing from his fist. Richard came back in March. He came alone, and he came without a folder. He stood in the doorway of his father's room for a long time, and he did not come in. And in his coat pocket was a letter with 2 words on the front and a fold worn through the middle from being carried. Arthur did not know his face that day. Richard sat down on the floor beside the wheelchair anyway, the way a boy sits, and after a while he took his father's hand. Nobody in the room spoke. On the last afternoon of his life, Arthur Vance was in the chair by the window with the light coming in, and the door to the room nobody had been allowed to enter was standing wide open. Elena was in the doorway with a bucket in her arms. She was not afraid. She had not been afraid in that doorway for a long time. Leo was asleep across the old man's lap with a filthy stuffed rabbit under his chin, and his hand wrapped around one trembling finger, and Arthur's hand was resting on the child's back, moving very slightly, keeping him asleep. He looked up and saw her in the doorway, and he did not know her name. He knew the hand. He knew the room was warm. He knew he was not alone. He said, "Stay," and she did. The house went to a trust that funds nursing care for people whose families do not come, and it opened 4 years later with a rug and a lamp in every room. And above the front door there is a photograph from 1952 of a boy of 2 holding a cloth rabbit and no plaque explaining it. Richard was named as its chairman. He accepted. He goes on Thursdays. Money can buy every room in a house and not one person willing to sit in them. And the only thing that ever reached Arthur Vance came from someone too small to know he was worth anything. If this one stayed with you, tap like and subscribe to help this small channel keep telling stories like it. And tell us in the comments, which city and which country are you watching from tonight?